there was a cluster of kids who did basically consecutively kill themselves. It was just awful. None of them were related to each other, and none of them were kids that were on anyone's radar the entire time. But there were 6 kids in one school year that died by suicide. And so you could imagine there were a lot of emotions, a lot of strong emotions, a lot of anxiety, and oftentimes the teachers would project that onto the
Hello, moms, dads, and grands, and welcome back to M4L Academy. If you're new here, thank you so much for tuning in. There are some pretty crazy topics in the news right now, which is why we like to say this is kind of like the school for parents, grandparents, and friends who are committed to defend and preserve liberty, with a special focus on issues that impact kids, schools, and of course, parental rights. We have been exploring SEL and mental health programs in schools, and today we'll get to hear from someone who was a counselor in the schools. She worked on the front lines and then saw her profession go, unfortunately, completely off the rails. We are joined by Pamela Garfield Jaeger. She's a licensed therapist with over 20 years in the field, and we are headed straight into the chaos. School mental health supports, SEL, and why the help we were promised would do so much is actually probably doing more harm than good. Pam has worked in the schools and seen firsthand how surveys can plant seeds, how counselors can end up between kids and parents rather than helping to build that connection with students and their parents. We'll talk about the trusted adult framing, AI therapy, and why parents simply cannot afford to sleepwalk through this time. All right, let's get into it. Welcome back to class. Today, we're continuing the conversation talking about mental health programs and supports in schools and how SEL is not turning out to be worth the investment that we were told that it was. Welcome to the program, Pamela Garfield Jaeger. And I said Pamela only because I should tell everyone a joke of always trying to figure out is it which name do we go with? And I know I'm Melissa, but I go by Missy, and so I always find it fun when someone has a nickname as well.
I make it difficult because I never have a good answer when people ask me what I prefer. They're always very nice and cordial. What would you prefer, Pam or Pamela? I'm always like, whatever, it's both. Usually I'm Pam in one-on-one conversation, so you can call me Pam, and the audience can reference me as Pam because that's usually what my friends call me.
Awesome. And now we are friends. I love it.
Yes.
That's great. Likewise, Missy, I always tell people, don't call me Melissa because otherwise I feel like I'm getting yelled at by somebody.
Oh, no. Yeah.
It's definitely more professional, I guess, but whatever. Either
That's
way.
it. I try to be sophisticated. It doesn't work out always. So.
Likewise. Well, I'm really excited to talk to you because you are boots on the ground. You have experience working in the schools and in the mental health profession. And your story is fascinating, actually, because this whole time where everyone was kind of the COVID experience and Trump in office of waking up and everyone going, what is happening in the world? You like time traveled to a different planet, not exactly, but almost, and came back, probably felt like you were on a different planet. So can you just give us a little bit of your background and what was that moment that sort of woke you up to realize that things had changed so much?
Yeah, I have an interesting story. So I've been a social worker, licensed therapist for over 20 years, since actually the late 90s is when I went to graduate school and got my training and came up the ranks. And in 2016, when President Trump was elected first, I came down with a pretty bad disability. I had a repetitive stress injury from a bad desk that UCSF gave me, and I had to drop out of work about a year later, but I was already, pretty in dire straits from the pain. So I was just surviving, not paying attention to what was happening politically and even in my profession. I had to drop out completely, kind of spent a couple of years in survival mode, just fighting to get the proper health care and figuring out what was wrong with me. Doctors weren't believing me, and it was a whole odyssey, and it was difficult. So I kind of went underground, really, and was not a part of the profession. And then fast forward to 2021, after 2 surgeries, I finally got well enough to get back to work part-time. I was still having pain. I couldn't even type my notes very well, but I really wanted to be back in the world. And this was in California. There were lockdowns. We were still wearing masks. We were still, quote unquote, social distancing, although we did have in person sessions. And did what was called a per diem, working with kids and adults. And that was when I noticed that the profession had completely gone off the rails because they were affirming these kids' gender. Half the girls were identifying as non-binary, and my colleagues were completely going along with it. They were just obsessed with the pronouns, and I just thought I was in the twilight zone. And there were so many things. That was around the time right after the George Floyd riot, so a lot of the critical race theory was prevalent at the time. A lot of the social justice ideas were prevalent at the time, and it would contradict everything that I had known that's helpful in therapy, which is personal responsibility, not blaming society for things, and not obviously pretending you're something you're not, and acknowledging what's really happening underneath the surface, which is what was not happening.
That is, it's funny because I feel like that. I know I said it already, but it truly feels like that was the moment, or that was the time period that just so many people woke up. My background is in business, and so I feel like I have somewhat similar in that I was always aware of things, but I wasn't deeply involved. And but I had kids in high school, and they're telling me about their friends, and that the whole trans topic is really what woke me up prior to COVID, because I was like, this is not a thing. Like, this is not real. Like, it cannot possibly be real when they're telling me what their friends are saying. It was shocking. So I can only imagine what it was like to be in it and how amazing that would have been.
Yes.
So you now you were working in the schools as well, though, right?
So before that job, I had basically started this new job that sent me on this disability track because they gave me a bad desk at UCSF.
Oh,
But before that, I was working at a high school in Palo Alto, California. It was unfortunately kind of infamous for the suicide clusters that it had, and one of the clusters happened while I was the head counselor there. So I have a lot of experience working with suicidal teens and crisis, and also working with very anxious adults who react to the suicidal situation in the community. So that was rough. I had to leave that job, and then I thought I had a great job at UCSF, which was better paying and everything. And then, well, life took a different turn.
well, and maybe ironically, maybe it was really for a reason to get you out, be prepared for this. So
It
when you
feels
were,
like that. Yeah, it
yeah,
kind of set me on this whole completely different path, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I really think that. But you got to work with these children. So what we're told, anything with the mental health concerns and problems and issues, that was the whole reason why schools brought in SEL and social emotional learning, because it's removing or addressing these traumas that are all children have apparently faced, and all of these surveys to make sure see where everyone's at. So can you talk to us a little bit about what you actually saw in the schools, and especially given that you were working with children who were clearly struggling?
Yeah, so at that high school, this was about 10 years ago now. I can't believe it's been so long. So I think it's changed since then. It's probably gotten a lot worse. I'm not there, but even at that time, that school was sort of ahead of its time where it was doing these mental health surveys and asking them about their thoughts of suicide and their mental health symptoms, asking them about if they were depressed, things like that. So they were already planting these seeds and prompting kids to think about these harmful thoughts and such. And I would get referrals to my clinic from these surveys. So that was happening. And I don't know how much the parents knew this was happening. I think many of them did know and were okay with it because they thought it was a good thing. But I think some of them probably were not okay with it, especially those who were not furnished, not, there are a lot of people there who are immigrants, like generation immigrants from different countries who have different ideas about mental health. So they were trying to sneak a lot of those kids that they thought they were supposed to help. And I don't know how ethical that was.
Wow.
So that happened. And then I don't know what structured SEL they had in the classroom because I was not in the classrooms, but I do remember a lot of the teachers bringing in therapy in their classrooms, kind of facilitating group therapy type sessions that were inappropriate. Sometimes it was more of them self-disclosing their own thoughts and ideas. Like I said, there was a cluster of kids who did basically consecutively kill themselves. It was just awful. None of them were related to each other, and none of them were kids that were on anyone's radar the entire time. But there were 6 kids in one school year that died by suicide. And so you could imagine there were a lot of emotions, a lot of strong emotions, a lot of anxiety, and oftentimes the teachers would project that onto the kids because they were worried, for one, and also they were dealing with their own emotions. And instead of being able to contain that, they were kind of spreading their own feelings onto the kids, which is not healthy.
Wow, that is it's funny because you see that also with these other ideologies, like, why is it so important for adults to have approval of children, right? Like the whole,
Mhm.
drag queen story hour, why do you have to have
Yeah.
approval of children? It's odd how we're in this place in
And the
society.
teachers that need the kids to affirm their pronouns and use their name, and it's this whole narcissistic thing, that
It
dynamic.
is really,
Mhm.
really strange. So it's interesting because we see all this mental health programming in schools, and I think one of the things that most people we just spoke with Chris Evans as well talking about this topic, and he talked a little bit about something else that you might be able to shed some more light on, which is the idea of the school counselors and how normally if someone's having a problem you go to the counselor, maybe, right? I think I talked to my counselor like twice in
Mm.
school, barely at all. You just didn't talk to your counselors all that much. But now the big difference, or one of the biggest differences, that counselors aren't guidance counselors anymore,
Mm-mm.
they're school counselors. So can you just unpack a little bit of what is the difference, and what should parents be concerned about with the association of school counselors?
Well, guidance counselors used to be more about career counselors or educational counselors. I mean, I'm a Gen X. I remember going to my guidance counselor to talk about what college I was going to go to or what career path I wanted to go on, and that was their purpose. They I imagine they also did a little bit of crisis intervention with a handful of children that needed that kind of support, but nowadays it's broadened very much. My role, actually, I was not a school employee. I was just a mental health counselor on campus and supervising a team of other people who were doing counseling there. There were school counselors and our jobs overlapped. But yeah, now they're very much trained to, I mean, I would say just divide families, triangulate themselves between kids and parents, make kids very dependent, very, I'd say neurotic. I mean, constantly always bringing up feelings and not have that type of individual resilience that I think you and I probably had because we're a little older than, kids in school now. But yeah, their training is completely different than what it was in the past, and their roles were very different too, their expectations.
I think it's so important that parents recognize this. Like I say this, I feel like I'm a broken record by saying this, but as my worst, one of the things I would blame myself or feel the worst about, I should say, as a parent is that I truly just thought that school was like when I was a kid. I didn't
Yeah.
realize how much had changed. And I have a feeling a lot of other parents are like that too. You just talked about the idea of focusing so much on feelings, and then also similarly before we started recording we were talking about um, when you're bringing up these ideas, so asking about feelings all the time, and bringing up these other topics through mental health surveys. I've heard sometimes there's pushback that that doesn't actually cause a problem. But can you help debunk why that would cause a problem when you're like planting the seed essentially?
Yeah, so there's, like you said, you are planting the seed. You're giving them ideas of things they wouldn't be thinking about otherwise. You're also kind of setting it in, right? You're setting it in stone more. If something maybe was a fleeting thought or fleeting idea, you're reinforcing it. So you're reinforcing these ideas. You're causing them to think about thoughts and feelings they may not have even thought about, or giving them language that they wouldn't have even had. And then you're also prompting them to do these surveys, and then kids are kids. They are going to say what maybe they think you want to hear, or say what will bring them outcomes that they want, like getting out of class or getting more attention. It's weird that we're not thinking about that, especially when we're talking about teenagers who maybe are seeking attention because that's normal for kids to do, and to not have any discretion when it comes to kids that really might need help and kids that might be answering something a little more exaggerated for a specific outcome. So we can cause a lot of problems. And in a way, I feel like these surveys are harming the kids that really need help. They think we're going to catch them all. It's like a fishing net for all these kids that need help. But what's happening is we're catching so many fish that the ones that need the help are getting diluted. They're not actually getting what they need. That's what happened to
That
me as the counselor. I was overwhelmed because they kept sending everybody to me constantly. And I was like, this kid's fine. They're just, they're just, they just want attention and they're okay. I know that kid. They're all right. But the adults were very anxious about it, and they felt, more is more, and I'd say less is more.
that's fun. It's funny. I shouldn't laugh. I don't mean it in a way like to disregard the seriousness of it, but that's exactly right because kids are kids and they're smart and they will absolutely try to take there will always be kids that will try to take advantage of the system. Like it or not, it's a fact. It's just how it is.
It's
Not saying
human
every kid
nature.
will. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly right. Someone will try to take advantage of it, and we do have to recognize that. So you mentioned there before the idea of dividing families. So is it fair to say that that maybe I guess maybe unpack that a little bit. What does that look like? Why are schools and teachers being and counselors being framed as trusted adults and so much focus on secrecy and just the idea of even dividing families is so
Mhm.
sad. Like how does this happen that parents maybe aren't realizing?
This was one of the most shocking aspects to me when I kind of woke up or recognized how much my field had been captured by Marxist ideology, and I just never thought about it that way. I was a naive social worker. I'm actually a social worker, which is very embarrassing because social workers are crazy, but I became a social worker before they were all crazy. And but and when I was a supervisor, and when I was trained too, we didn't try to divide families. In fact, one of the challenges was to try to get the parents more involved, especially in these high income California towns, because the parents were very busy working and they kind of wanted us to just fix it for them, which was the
Yeah.
problem, of course. And
Hmm.
by outsourcing the counseling at the school, that reinforced the problems that the family really had, which was the parents needed to be more involved and not always be so consumed with their careers or whatever. Sometimes it wasn't always a choice, sometimes it was life. But regardless, they needed to be involved. They needed to return my phone calls or my counselor's phone calls and come in and meet with us. But just because of the model of it, kids on campus and them at work during the day, it just really didn't it wasn't a great model for doing counseling, because involving the family, even parents who you might want to believe are problematic, you need to involve them because they're the ones we need to help them in order to help the kids. That's the way I've always been trained. However, now that is not the case. Now parents are immediately looked at as the enemy, as kind of ignorant, and that the counselor knows best and often will keep secrets from the parents. I mean, I'm sure you've heard countless stories where the school counselor has kept a secret from the parents. Of course, a gender is the most common situation where they transition a child behind a parent's back without telling the parents at all, without consulting what's happening at home. Usually, there is something specific happening at home, like mom has cancer or a divorce or some trauma, and something that would be really important for the counselor to know about to put the situation in context. Well, they're not doing that anymore, and to me, that's malpractice. I always believed that you need to do an assessment, and part of that assessment is to understand what's happening with the family and maybe get to know the parent, even some of their faults, because you sometimes you meet a mom that's honestly very difficult, and then you understand why the kid is having some issues, and that's the reality too. You need to know to understand the context of it. But that's not what's happening now. Part of it's just easier not to involve the parents, quite frankly. So there's some of that. If they have such high volumes of kids that they're seeing because of all these surveys and all of this everybody needs therapy mentality, then they just don't have the time and the bandwidth to do this kind of family exploration and involve the parents. So some of it's just that, but also it is ideology. They do believe that they know better, and they automatically assume the parent is going to go against their ideas, so they don't even give the parents a chance to talk to them and give them their side of the story.
It's really amazing because it has been only 10 years. You said it's just 10 years and the time period you went through it from when you were injured or when you were working in this and then when you were injured and then came back. was really only a couple years, right?
Yeah, it was like this 4-year span. I think it
And
was happening a little bit before I dropped out, and then it really took off, before and after and during the lockdowns
it
is what
it se
happened.
it's just shocking to me because now, I mean, it feel 10 years ago feels like a lifetime ago. I mean, COVID feels like a lifetime ago. So,
Yeah, 5 years
I def
already.
yeah, it's just I'm just like, it's amazing to me,
6
but
years,
I'm
actually.
what, for COVID? Yeah,
Yeah.
right? Isn't
Oh
that
my
crazy?
gosh, just realized that.
Um, yeah, when I was talking to someone the other day and we mentioned, "Oh, wow, it's 6 years ago." Holy cow, we both just took a pause, like, "Wow, it's been 6 years already." But it's so shocking to me because it feels like it's been so long, but in reality, 10 years is not that long, and it's just incredible how
So much has
fast
changed, so
so
much
much
has
has
changed.
changed. So where do you, and this is a little bit, I know we didn't really get a chance to prepare for this in any way, so you may not have a real understanding, but I'm just curious, where do you have any idea how your profession went so off the rails in such a short period of time that it would go from trying to get to know the parent, which actually I really appreciate the concept of just being so busy. I think that's totally fair. I think that is a legit um, contributing factor for it for
Mhm.
sure. But I don't think that's the primary reason. Do you have any idea of like how could have things gone so extreme so quickly?
Well, I think our cancel culture is a big part of it. I think that the people who were more reasonable were pushed out, and the
Mm,
more selfish, narcissistic, immature counselors took over, and they took over the training. What I've been doing with my time the last few years when I haven't been as directly in the field or in those schools is I've been taking trainings, going to conferences to see what they're learning so that I can know on the ground what are therapists learning, and it is very shocking what they've been teaching, which is, report to CPS if they're not affirming the gender, if there's a divorce situation, to favor the parent who is the affirming parent. Um, the just that, that of course there's that suicide lie that you've probably heard that if you don't affirm the child's gender identity, that they will kill themselves. So therapists really believe that there'll be blood on their hands if they don't do this. So they're afraid to basically bring in the parent, that there'll be this kind of, wild card. The parent will maybe not affirm properly, and then they really, I think they are true believers, many of them, that a kid will just go and kill themselves. So most of therapists, I still believe, are just naive and not getting the right information. They're gullible and they haven't worked out their own issues. So they have this rescue fantasy on these kids. They kind of project, I think, maybe something about themselves. They want to rescue these kids. Like a lot of counselors who've had social issues themselves have been a misfit or not fit in or been picked on or maybe had difficulties with their parents growing up. They project that on the kids. They think, oh, this is what's going to happen. So I need to protect them without recognizing this is a separate individual with very different circumstances. So that happens a lot. When I was going and training, that in therapy terms, that's called transference and countertransference. And what we learn as therapists is to learn how to put that in check, to take our issues out of it and really be able to look at the case as clearly as possible without our stuff muddling it. But now they're not getting that training anymore. They don't have that kind of insight. So
hmm.
I think they're actually leaning into that more. S-
Wow, that's really interesting because again, I feel like it's just that back to that idea of people just not realizing how much has changed because what you just described, the types of training that's happening. And also, I actually think that's a great point. I really appreciate that insight because I do think I can absolutely see the people that would go into therapy would be people who are very empathetic and want to help and
Yeah.
probably have gone through something themselves that completely aligns.
I mean, I'll
So,
be honest, I needed someone to check me in the beginning. I remember my first internship was in Harlem in New York City, and there were a lot of kids who were really struggling and, low income families. And I certainly had the impulse to kind of want to hug them all, rescue them. You have that. That's natural. And
mhm.
I remember talking to my supervisors about that, and they talked about how that feeling is normal, but you don't really act on it, and you still recognize that even if the parents aren't doing the kind of job that you would hope they would do, that they're still the parents and they're going home to their life and you cannot rescue them from that. And that's a hard lesson. You have to have some separation and learn that you can't control bad things that happen to people that you meet or you're trying to help, and you want to help and you want to do the best you can. But that was a maturing moment for me. I don't think that new, young, naive therapists, which I was at one time, learn those lessons anymore.
Do you have to be is there like an apprenticeship period
Yeah.
for okay, all right. I
And I was
mean,
a yeah, so I got supervised, and then I was a of the people that were working under me at the school, for
okay.
example, were actually being
Yeah.
supervised by me. So I'd help
Okay.
them deal with the crisis, I'd help them, we'd consult about their cases all the time, and then we'd also talk about things that impacted them personally when they met with certain kids that, push their buttons, right? That's what therapists do, like, for better or worse, we talk about what pushes our buttons so we don't let our buttons get pushed so hard. But again, I don't think that's happening nowadays, and you need to have a certain level of insight to be able to do that, and I also don't think I don't know if they're just not flexing that muscle, or I'm not sure.
Huh. That is really interesting. I didn't realize there was that much, but I also do actually think that's a great I think that's a great model theoretically, as long until you have too many people that just all are believing the lie, and
Exactly,
that's
the
when
supervisors are pushing on the
yeah.
therapists. I mean, I meet the ones who are saying they can't stand their supervisor because 'cause they're pushing all these social justice ideas, they're pushing this Marxist ideology, the critical race theory stuff, and of course, the gender stuff is the biggest thing.
And so that critical race theory too, and the gender ideology, like those, I've heard you talk about that elsewhere, the identity politics and victimhood culture through
Mhm.
CRT especially. And can you talk a little bit about how with COVID and this increase in being on screens and online communities, and then of course adding in CRT and cancellation or cancel culture, how we ended up like why I think I heard you kind of allude to at least to why gender dysphoria just skyrocketed. But why would completely healthy kids want to do that or claim that?
Well, I mean, I think that there's been a large operation to push this on them. It is a social contagion. I think you and I and your listeners already acknowledge that, but I don't think we realize how much of an agenda was happening, how much funding. If you look at the government, during the Biden years, they had tons of funding towards these programs to push it onto kids. If you look at all the entertainment, you look at very famous children's programming like Blue's Clues and Disney shows, they push the gender stuff all over. Some of it was very blatant and some of it was very subtle. Either way, it was there and it was planting lots of seeds. And then of course the internet is one of the biggest sources where kids learn these ideas and get indoctrinated. In California, and I don't think it's just California, they use the Trevor Project for suicide prevention, and the Trevor Project is an agency that focuses on the LGBTQ plus population, and they call themselves a suicide prevention agency, but really what they are is a grooming agency. They and the school I worked at, they actually had their 800 number, and maybe it's a 900 number, I don't know, their number on their ID cards, and it's
Wow.
funded. It's actually been mandated since I left, but they were there when I was there, and they have chat groups with ages 12 to 24. Why are 12-year-olds with 24-year-olds? That's already a red flag. If you log
Yeah.
onto their website, there's an escape button right away so that if a kid is looking at it, they can hide it from their parents or whoever their guardian might be. Um, and interesting, a detransitioner, his name is Johnny Skinner, he just testified a couple of months ago, and he was a gay man who was feeling suicidal when he realized that he hated his body from the puberty blockers and the cross-sex hormones that he was dealing with, and he called the Trevor Project when he was feeling suicidal, and they actually hung up on him.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
But if you
That's
look at
great.
their yeah, and you look at their social media, you'll see how indoctrinating and how grooming it is, and how it's also in a way indoctrinating parents too, because it shows these scenarios where the parents are doing the right thing by affirming their children.
Oh, oh wow. Yeah, I think that I agree with you. I do believe this has been it's been a coordinated effort. It's a
Mhm.
slow roll. It's been a slow burn. It's slow, what is it? A very slow and then all of a sudden all at once or something like that.
Yeah.
And it really has been. But I think that's important to recognize. And you've also mentioned too, and I think this is really important for people to realize with that the intersection of CRT and this pushing of victimhood mentality, especially for people who are not of a victim class, if you will. They're not considered oppressed, mainly that would be white people, then especially if we're middle class or higher or anything even close to that. And if you're a guy, boy, you are tough out of luck. But that there is a desire to try to fit in. And
Mhm.
I've seen that. I actually saw that with my kids, not to the extreme, but I did see little things like maybe claiming anxiety over everything or claiming other things that it's like, that's not, I don't think you, I think you're totally
Yeah, all
fine.
the identity, all the diagnoses,
Yeah.
uh, the autism diagnoses, the ADHD diagnoses. Of course, some of it is real. I actually do
Yes.
think there is a higher prevalence of it, and that's probably for another podcast, so what's behind that? But of course, we're also over-identifying with these things, and kids are wearing these things as badges, and it's a problem that they just always want a label for things, partly for social clout, partly for excuses to not have to do things. Um, it's yeah, I don't it's just part of our culture now,
And
and
that
yeah.
that's a really hard thing, I think, for some parents to grasp. I'm let me just rephrase that. I'm going to assume that's a really hard thing for some parents to grasp because it was really
It
hard for
is.
me to grasp. Because
Why would
my
you do
parents,
that? Why would you want a label? When we were growing up, we didn't want
yeah,
labels. Now they do.
no.
They're kinda collecting them like, prizes.
Yeah, yes, they are collecting them. It's what it seems like, and it is such it is so far removed from the way that we were raised that it is truly hard to see why on earth anyone would want to do that. So I think that's just really important to call out because it is something that is really happening, and parents just need to be aware of it. So okay, so let's shift a little bit over to some other forms of therapy that we're seeing, and this is a constantly top of mind topic is in the world of AI.
Mhm.
And we've seen a rise of AI chatbots as therapists, which is really scary to me, and even in schools as well. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you have any concerns?
Yeah, I was actually reading more about it in more detail before this interview to look at it. It was so hard for me to look at it. I have this visceral gut reaction. I feel it's so dystopian. I already honestly have a problem with just human therapy on Zoom. That's become very
Oh,
normalized. To me, I don't even think that's a good idea. I'm actually in the minority now for that. That's become so normal. But I don't think it's a good idea, especially for kids who have been on the screens for too long, to be interacting with someone who's supposed to be a therapist through a screen. It's also there's some safety concerns there too. If they start to act out or have some kind of mental breakdown, what are you going to do through a screen? Not
that's a
much.
good
You can't
point.
really do anything if they run off and say they're going to go do something harmful. So AI is just next level to that. I and we're hearing. I'm actually hearing about. There's one person I even know who's become addicted to AI and is almost hallucinating around it. We can't control it. It's this terrible thing where we don't know what's going on and it's so impersonal. And I think also people don't recognize what therapy is and what therapy does. It's not about giving you the right answer. It's actually about a human connection and it's about
Mm,
actually having a back and forth with a human. Usually therapy is when there's some kind of issue with the parent or the what they call the object in therapy terms, and the therapist kind of reenacts that so that the person can then, move on and carry out healthy relationships and make better choices. It's not just about saying the magic words to go do the right thing. And cognitive behavioral therapy is great, but the in of itself without a human being is not really very helpful.
That's interesting. I think you're probably the first person I've actually heard it from. I'm just trying to think if I have heard it before, but I don't think I have heard a real concern over like therapy over Zoom. But
I'm
that's
in
a
the minority there. Honestly, most of my colleagues, people who I know, conservative therapists too, they all do remote therapy. I hate it.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
I
I really hate it. I know people do it because it's hard to find a good therapist, so they wanna meet with somebody. Sometimes they'll think something's better than nothing. I don't always think that's true, actually. Sometimes it's something is
really,
not better than nothing. It depends. But I really have concerns about it.
yeah. No, I think that's a great point. And what you raised up, so that's something I never would have thought of ever, is if someone spirals or has a breakdown of some sort, then what can you do? You're not there. You can't do anything through a screen. That's a really
You
great
also
point.
can't assess, oftentimes the person's using drugs or something, and they can hide it through the screen. They You
Oh.
can't smell that they're high or see that. There's a lot they can hide through a screen, and there's nothing you can do. A lot of the assessment is just physically sitting in the room and seeing how they're dressed, seeing how they smell, seeing their actions. It's also about getting them up and out of the house. And sometimes about the structure and getting
Yeah.
somewhere. When I worked at this other program years ago with like mentally ill adults, these were adults, but still, the therapy was getting them up, showered and dressed, and in front of other people and giving them a structure day to day so they could learn how to do that on their own because they had come out of such a bad mental health episode. And so to do that all on Zoom, which they had done during COVID, and I believe they are still doing these programs, it's called IOP,
Oh, wow.
individualized outpatient programs. They are still doing these on Zoom, and they're not nearly as effective. I don't know if they're effective at all.
Wow, that's really interesting because I do agree with that 100%. Just, I wouldn't say that I've necessarily had a terrible mental health concern problem moment myself, but I've definitely had some bad days. And I mean, been married 23 years and have 3 kids, my youngest 19, and all girls. So you definitely have some moments on throughout that time. That said, sometimes some of the things that really just kept me going and was having that routine of getting up
Exactly.
and going. That is a really great point,
The
and I think
structure
so
of
many
it
people just
is
don't think
important.
about that. Yeah,
And so
that's super
AI, you can pick up the phone at any time. I guess it's through an app, and that's not healthy either. You shouldn't be on your phone. Usually the people who are having these problems are on their phones already too much as it is, and they need human interaction. Also, what are they programming these apps with? And of course, we've
yeah.
got all the ideology in them. And from what I understand about AI, it's very predictive and reinforcing of what you want to hear. So that's also a big problem. I just think it's just completely something we can't control, and I have no good things to say about it whatsoever.
Well, I think you and I are completely aligned in that way. There is not a whole lot that I think is, not to mention you start talking about the data. I mean, people are pouring out their hearts and their deepest
Mhm.
secrets to these platforms. Are you going to tell me the data? We're going to trust big tech not to take your data? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that
where it's at.
too. But yeah, the data collection, I didn't even think about that part. I'm just thinking of just how dystopian it is and how impersonal it is, but there's so many more elements to it. We're putting all of our most personal thoughts and feelings out into these programs, and of course they're using it. Who knows what they're using it for, right?
Exactly, exactly. It's and this will transition us right into the next topic that I am excited to talk to you about because I think it's just well, it's a hot button issue, and it's hard for a lot of people to talk about something so hot potato maybe of exploratory therapy that therapists are almost under attack really because there was a pretty big case ruling that on conversion therapy, right? What's been deemed or termed conversion therapy, and that's being weaponized, and it's really truly it's unfair because I've read your work on it talking rightly about these all of the visualizations being so extreme. Sure, I get that, and it sounds scary, but it really truly it's a what it's actually doing is trying to truly help someone. Good conversion therapy, right? Or which is just, so can you talk through like why, where is the label gone wrong? Why is it being weaponized? What is it actually? What should people know about this?
Yeah, so they've hijacked that term and weaponized it against normal therapy. So conversion therapy comes to mind normally for people who aren't really following this topic. They think of electric shock therapy, or they think of locking someone up in a concentration camp or something and making them declare they're not gay and some awful torture device, and that's not what's happening at all. I don't even know of any instance like that. I think if we knew that was happening, we'd be hearing about it because we know that that's not something that's accepted by pretty much anybody. And now they're calling what you say, that's the way I like to call it, is it's exploratory therapy. If someone it's both gay or trans, which is controversial because some people don't wanna even they still kind of people in my camp don't wanna say that perhaps someone who believes that they're gay, there might be something underneath that too. But there are circumstances where that is the case, especially with medications these days, and then there is still a lot of, stuff in the media that influences young people that to be gay, and, we're flooded by it all the time. I think we don't even realize it. How and then if you look at the statistics, and there's plenty of studies dating back to the 60s and 70s, people who have same-sex attractions usually have some kind of trauma or attachment issue, like a severely abusive or narcissistic parent. I'm not saying that's true of everybody, but if you look at a lot of even the detransitioners, they'll say, "Well, I'm just gay," but then you look a little deeper and you realize, well, some of them, even public ones, they're very honest about pretty bad trauma that they experienced. So we're talking about really exploring trauma, or exploring perhaps autistic traits or autism in its of itself. We're exploring family issues, family crisis, and oftentimes people will take on these identities when they're going through something, or these identities will serve some kind of purpose when they're struggling, and it's the job of a therapist to investigate that, to find out. And of course, I don't believe anyone is born in the wrong body, and so when we come to that, it's even more ludicrous that they're saying if you help somebody just learn to accept and appreciate the body that they're born in other words, a woman learns that they're a woman and they're okay with that, that's called conversion therapy if they originally believed that they were trans. So it's so dystopian, right? It's so Orwellian to think about that, like the backwards. It's very confusing too, and I think that's intentional. They're trying to confuse people. So yeah, it's the job of the therapist to find out what is best for that person and to explore that. And then there are even patients or clients that want to explore perhaps why they're same-sex attracted, and they're not comfortable with that because of their religious beliefs, and they're choosing that, and they should be allowed to find a therapist that will do that with them, and at least explore it and find out, like, maybe not in a very forceful way, with ethics and compassion. But yeah, these laws that will not allow that, and that is what the Supreme Court case allowed, because they called it, if you're not allowed to do that exploratory therapy, then it's viewpoint discrimination, and we're we should be allowed to explore those things in therapy and find out what might be underneath the surface, which there almost always is something underneath the surface.
Yeah, I think that was amazing to me was uh well, you actually said it really well there is the dystopian, the backwards thinking that goes into it, which is a very intentional thing. That is there's a reason why they take this and take these words and flip them around, and then it's cognitive dissonance of trying to make it make sense because it helps break down the structure mentally of just everything that you know to be reality. And I because it doesn't make sense that it would be conversion therapy in reality if that is helping you align with who you truly are. And that is, and
Yeah.
I've said this before, I really find it amazing because my husband is a very active person. So he's had a lot of injuries and that have resulted in various surgeries or physical therapy or whatever. And what I always found interesting is the insistence that they do the least invasive means possible before they would ever even consider surgery. So he always would have to do 6, 8, 10 months of physical therapy sometimes. And he's like, it's not, even the doctor would say, this probably isn't going to do anything, but we're going to do it first just in case. And it's so amazing to me that we recognize that and force it elsewhere in the medical profession, but in the psychological profession, which some people would argue is part of the medical profession, somehow we choose in this specific area only to not do the least
Yeah.
invasive method first.
It's a
So
huge
that,
blind spot,
yeah,
and it's like a religion, it's like a cult. It's this weird cult-like mentality around it. You can't reason with people about it. They believe all of these lies. They believe puberty blockers are reversible. They just, I don't know, it's weird, this magical thinking about the surgeries. They don't think about how painful and how barbaric they really are, and to think about doing them on children, removing the breasts of minors, on girls, and it's very normalized now, and it's not just normalized, it's promoted, and it's a virtue to do that and to support somebody who's doing that. Yeah, it's a completely backwards world, and yeah, we shouldn't be encouraging this very extreme intervention when we could just help them figure out what's wrong and why they want to remove their breasts. Very often it's because of sexual abuse or sexual assault, or porn is also very much related. Kids are very oversaturated and overexposed to porn too young, and so that plays a factor in it. There are so many variables here that are just being completely ignored, and they're just sending them straight to the knife, straight to these cross-sex hormones, and sending them on a lifelong path of health problems.
Boy, isn't that the truth. And it's
Yeah,
painful.
it's pretty
And
wild.
parents feel, and I hate to say it, but I kind of understand. There's a part of me, I don't fully understand, but I can see how parents who feel intimidated and overwhelmed and surprised and genuinely are scared for their children. So they feel like they need to trust the experts because
The
there's been a real
therapists are
shift.
manipulative, I'll tell
Yeah.
you.
Yes.
They
And well,
are.
there's
They
there's
act
a
really
real shift.
nice, and
Who
they're like,
the
"Oh, like, you're
oh
just going through grief," and they really, like, they gaslight you in this way you don't even realize it's happening.
and that which uh, unfortunately, then it leads people to these hurting parents to feel like they should be able to trust the experts even more.
Mhm.
And then when I mean, I feel horrific for the parents who go through that. You have already, or you have recognized that and have some resources for parents.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the resources that you put together to
Yeah.
help parents who are trying to navigate this situation?
Yeah, I've been sitting here with this book in my lap. This is my book.
Oh, it's upside down.
Oh, it's upside down.
Yeah, there you
Um,
go.
it's called A Practical Response to Gender Distress: Tips and Tools for Families. It's available on Amazon, and I wrote this specifically for parents who have been bamboozled by the quote unquote experts because they don't know what's up and what's down because there's so much conflicting information, so much bastardizing of the language, and so many lies. They keep quoting these studies that are just completely debunked, but they keep saying it anyway. When you know that how the left does that, they just repeat things over and over again, even though it's a
Mhm.
lie, until it just magically seems to be true, but it's not. But it's hard when you are really the only one. You think you're crazy. So my goal is with my book is to help parents recognize they're not crazy and give them the language and give them the tools so that they can stand up to this, both with the professionals that they're engaging with and with their own child and with their family, and then other people too that are probably giving them a hard time because it's not just the professionals, it's not just their child, but it's usually other family members and their friends, and it's just so many different people, and if you google it you don't know what's real, right? So my book really helps spell it out for you. uh, it breaks down some of these lies, the suicide lie. It breaks down what the harms of pronouns are. A lot of people recognize that surgeries and hormones are not great, but they might think, well, hormones, what's the problem? Well, I kind of talk about that. It is a problem. It's really tough psychologically. It causes a lot of conflict. It causes a lot of confusion, and it plants the seed, and it's all about indoctrinating kids. So I talk all about that, and then it has specific things on what to say and what to do to your own teenager, or not to, with your own teenager. That
Yeah,
didn't come out right.
that's all
What
good.
what to do with your own teenager if this is happening in your home, what to look out for, how to recognize that maybe your kid is being groomed by activists online, how to stand up to professionals. It has a trans English dictionary in it, so it breaks down a lot of the language in layman's terms. It talks about the conversion therapy. This was written 2 years ago before that Supreme Court case came out, but the idea was still out there that we were all called conversion therapists if we just wanted to explore. So it talks about that. So it's a great tool, and it's written in very plain language for people who are stressed out. There are a few other books that are great, and I actually have a whole list of other resources so you can really go down the rabbit hole. But my book,
Awesome.
it's just written in very plain language, and it's pictures too, and has art by detransitioners, including Chloe Cole,
Oh,
who's pretty prominent, about their experiences. So it really paints a picture about what's going on and gives you the language so that you can articulate why it's a problem. Most people they know it's wrong, but they don't really know how to explain it because it's very the trans activists or the people who have indoctrinated your children. They're very good. They
oh yeah.
they they know how to turn everything upside down. And you just feel like you don't even know what to say because it doesn't even make sense. So my book kind of helps you with that and gives you a little bit more confidence so you can stand up to it in a way that's useful.
That's that's awesome to hear. It almost sounds like it's apologetics for gender beliefs or the reality of gender.
Mhm.
That's awesome. Do you have any like quick tips that could you share if parents are feeling just maybe like one tip or one top one or two questions that parents should ask schools or counselors or therapists if they're concerned. Anything real quick?
Well, it's tricky with the schools because you don't always want to out yourself at the school that you're a transphobe, because that could
Yeah.
cause problems. So it depends on what school your kid's going to. Of course, the ideal is you pull a kid out of a school that you can't talk about this openly with, but not everybody has that luxury. So it really does depend in that area. But I just wouldn't be afraid to stand up to it and I'll ask your kid, and also I would talk to the schools just generally speaking about what your kid is allowed to do with a counselor, that you're not allowed to keep secrets, that kind of thing. You keep tabs on that and don't pretend like it's all fine, it's different with your kid. Because even I just talked to a parent this week because I do consultations. Even if this was in Maryland, so not even like a super blue state, and at Christian private school, the school counselor actually secretly transed her son.
Oh my gosh, that is awful.
Yeah, and it was such an obvious situation where the family's in crisis. The father had died of a drug overdose, so it's like,
Oh,
what? Like,
oh my goodness. It truly, I mean, you said malpractice before, but genuinely, that feels like malpractice. That's all.
it is malpractice, and I'm hoping in the future that there will be some more accountability. But I would watch all this. I mean, personally, if I had kids in school now, I would not let them be in any kind of public school. I don't trust anybody. I don't trust doctors. We know in the medical system they're taking kids 12 and up and pulling the kids aside and doing the surveys, and that in those settings too. I wouldn't allow for that to happen. They say they need the privacy so the kid could be more honest. No, don't let them do that. And if they want to ask your kid anything, ask their kid with you in the room, because you don't know what they're going to say and what they're going to do, and how they're going to affirm your child and send them further down this loophole. So yeah, I mean, just very much stay involved. And unfortunately, most of the cases happen when the parents are a little more hands off. They kind of don't realize, they kind of in hindsight 2020 they realize afterwards, oh god, I shouldn't have let my kids see this counselor. Sometimes it's a counselor they even hired, usually on Zoom, and they've been indoctrinating their kid right under their nose and they don't realize it. So stay very involved if the kid isn't counseling at all. I mean, I'm skeptical of a lot of counseling now. So in terms of that, but then the other thing is a lot of it's about taking away the screens and taking them away from the influences. It's like pulling them out of a cult, and that's what you're doing. And it's about helping the kid learn that you love them and that their home is with their family, not this chosen family over there, and figuring out what unmet need they're trying to fill with this, because that's also usually what it's about, some other unmet need. So you really want to address that as opposed to really actually going head on with the trans stuff. If they're very deep in it, usually you can't just confront them and say, like, cut it out, you're just a boy or something. That will not land. So you have to be a little creative and really more kind of go sideways and gain trust first.
I really appreciate you highlighting that because that I think is one thing that like I'm a pretty pragmatic person and I really like to just solve a problem. I'm the type of person that if I see a problem, all right, let's talk through this, let's figure it out. We're going to solve it, move on. And so, but it's not always a straightforward thing. And so, what you just said there, this may be a symptom of something that there is a real problem, which I know we talked a little bit about before, but truly there is something else that it probably is coming out of. And be willing to explore that and not go right at this symptom, instead try to be able to figure out what the real issue is. So you have resources for parents, you have great recommendations. I agree with you for parents. And I'm like you, I don't have kids in school or in K-12 right now anymore. So thankfully, I am extremely thankful for that. But some people do have kids
Yeah.
who are in that age, and you have some resources for that too. So can you talk to us a little bit about
So I'm
some positive options that we
Yeah.
have?
So when I wrote this book, I was stalking it on Amazon, right? Because it was fun to see my book on the list. Like it was like on the top teen LGBTQ list on Amazon. It was just fun to watch. But what was not fun, seeing what it was next to, these like horrible, creepy books, these highly sexualized books. And then I just kept looking and seeing all these just children's books that tell kids they're born in the wrong body, I Am Jazz and Bye Bye Binary, and there's just what the gay BCs. I don't. There's so many books out there. This is disgusting books that plant these seeds. They're relentless. Every kind of media they have infiltrated to plant these seeds in your kids' brains to believe that they could be born in the wrong body or their friends could, and they need to support that. So I wrote a book called Froggy Girl, and that's this here. And the art is done actually by a detransitioner, a man who used to believe he was a woman, very artistic and creative, which is not an accident. A lot of the detransitioners have that temperament, and it kind of goes hand in hand. But anyway, he has since learned, obviously, that he's comfortable as a man, and he's never been a woman because no one is ever born in the wrong body. I wrote this book. I said it's called Froggy Girl. It's about a little girl who wishes she was a frog, and then everybody supports her frogginess. So her parents give her frog feet, and her teacher gives her a special flag, and her friends support her. They say they want to be nice, even if it means there'll be a price. And she tries to do the froggy things, but it doesn't work because she's not a frog, of course. She can't swim well, she can't make the froggy sounds, and then despite the fact that everyone supports her, she feels lonely and sad. And so she goes out on this little walk and she meets this wise turtle here. And the wise turtle helps her learn that she's a beautiful little girl.
That's
Um,
awesome.
and it's beautiful
And
art. This is the last page. Um,
oh, I love it.
yeah,
That's so like cheery. That's so positive
and it
feeling.
rhymes, of course. So the little girl learned to love the way God made her, beautiful and smart and full of fervor.
Oh, I
It's
love that.
available on all platforms. It's all digital book platforms. Like I love
Oh,
this, the froggy at her feet.
that is cute.
Um,
Well, this has been fantastic. I feel so encouraged, genuinely, because when we were first realizing all of this stuff that was happening, it honestly, as someone who was just kind of like living my life and working at my job that I really loved, by the way, in business, and just focusing on advancing my career and getting certifications and all the things that we're told to do, it was so shocking and somewhat overwhelming, true too. But seeing that there are people like you who are there and helping and providing resources is so encouraging. So what if would you like to leave us with any final thoughts, anything maybe we didn't get to touch on, or any tips for parents to help raise mentally healthy, resilient children?
well, the thing I always just like to say is I really hope for parents to believe in themselves and not doubt themselves, to trust their instincts, and just because an expert tells them something and it doesn't feel right, to stop and ask questions. I think a lot of what happens is parents, they don't trust their gut anymore and they're insecure, and the kids kind of pick up on that. And if you can recognize this is not right, or at least take some time and explore it and figure out rather than taking things for face value, I think you and your family will do better for it.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And tell everyone where they can find you and follow your work.
So I have a website which I'm going to improve on, but it's called thetruthfultherapist.org, and you can email me through that, and people actually book consultations through that, and it has links to my books on there too.
Awesome.
And then my social media it used to be Truth Therapist, but then it sounds like Truth the Rapist. So we changed that, and now it's it's my name with a P, P Garfield Jaeger, and Jaeger spelled with a J. So Garfield like the cat, Jaeger. That's my Twitter X, and then
I like
my
it.
yeah, and my Instagram is at the dot truthful therapist. So I'm the
Mhm.
truthful therapist. Really, is how you find me. I have a Substack, which is Pam the Truthful Therapist. What else? I have a YouTube, but it's not very active. But I upload videos on there, which is also the Truthful Therapist. So you can find me either by putting in my name or by putting in the Truthful Therapist is a way you can find most of my work.
Awesome. And we will get it all linked down in the description below so people can find you. Thank you so much, Pam. We
Mhm.
have so appreciated this conversation and the truth, speaking about the truth. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, that felt like a masterclass from Pamela. If you remember nothing else, remember this: that whole more is more strategy for mental health is not supported by the data, especially when it turns into these endless surveys, rumination, and ends up just dividing families. Like she said, parents, trust your instincts, not the experts. At least not when everything in your gut is telling you this is wrong. Don't be afraid to ask questions because unfortunately, parents are too often treated like the enemy, and secrecy is becoming a feature, not a bug. So go be the parent you were told not to be: involved, informed, and unapologetically present. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit like and subscribe because that really does make a difference. Then share it with your family or a friend because only as we all are educated on these topics can we become engaged citizens, not enraged activists. The mission of M4L Academy is summed up well by James Madison. The advancement and diffusion of knowledge is the only true guardian of liberty. And that is why we do what we do. Class dismissed.